wondered, as you make that morning choice between coffee and tea, if that decision is already known? What if someone, or something, knows not only this, but every single one of your future moves? Today, we're diving into one of humanity's oldest and most mind-bending paradoxes. Do we truly have free will if God knows everything beforehand? Brace yourselves, because the answers might surprise you and make you see your life in a whole new light. To begin, let's define our two key players. On one side, we have divine omniscience. This is the concept of a higher power that knows absolutely everything: the past, the present, and crucially, the future. On the other side, we have our free will, that innate feeling that we make our own choices, from what we have for breakfast to who we choose to spend our lives with. At first glance, these two ideas seem utterly incompatible. All right, let's dissect this conflict. What exactly is the main problem here? At first glance, it seems straightforward. If there's a force that knows the future down to the tiniest detail, then that future already exists. It's not just a possibility, it's a fact. It's as real and immutable as the past. Think about that for a second. This means your very next breath, the words you just thought, even what you'll have for dinner a week from now, it's all already known. And if something is known for certain, then it can't possibly change. It's like reading the last page of a book. The ending is already written, and the characters can't rewrite their own story. And this is where the crucial question arises. Where in this scenario is there room for our free will? If every step we take is predetermined and already known, how can our choices truly be free? Is it merely an illusion? A feeling of control? Or are we simply moving along pre-laid tracks? This is the fundamental knot we're going to try and unravel today. To make this clearer, let's use a simple metaphor. Imagine your entire life as a movie. This movie isn't just being filmed right now. It's already complete, fully edited, and sitting on a shelf. And God is the only viewer who has watched it from beginning to end. He knows not just the major plot points, like when you'll graduate or meet the love of your life. He knows every single detail, every awkward joke you made at a party, every fleeting glance at a stranger, every tear you secretly wiped away, thinking no one was watching. In this scenario, you are of course the main character, but you're not the scriptwriter. You are merely an actor, flawlessly performing your role without ever knowing your next lines. Sounds pretty disheartening, doesn't it? Every achievement, every mistake, and where they're not the result of your free will. They're simply the next scene in a pre-written, pre-edited film. Proponents of hard determinism, or simply determinism as it's known in philosophy, believe exactly this. For them, the concept of free will is nothing more than a convenient illusion. It's a comforting self-perception that makes us feel like masters of our own destiny, but which in fact lacks any real basis. They argue that every action we take, every thought we have, is merely an inevitable consequence of preceding causes, a chain stretching back to the dawn of time. If we knew all the factors, all the physical laws, and all the chemical reactions in the brain, we could precisely predict every subsequent human action. This idea finds a very clear echo in certain religious doctrines, such as Calvinism. Here, it's stated that God not only knows everything, but has also actively predetermined everything that will happen, meaning he doesn't just passively observe, but is the architect of all existence. The election of some to salvation and others to condemnation occurs by his will long before our birth. This is a very radical stance, which effectively eliminates our personal merit or guilt, as everything is already decided for us. For many, this seems profoundly unfair and even cruel. But let's try to look at this situation from a completely different angle. What if knowledge doesn't equate to coercion? Perhaps we're making a logical error by conflating knowing with compelling. Imagine you're watching a recording of yesterday's football match. As a spectator, you perfectly know the outcome. Who will score? Who will get a yellow card? Which team will win? Your knowledge is absolutely accurate, but you have absolutely no influence over the players' actions on the field. You didn't force them to run faster or miss a shot on goal. They performed their actions freely. and you are merely observing events that have already occurred. This concept is called compatibilism, and it is essentially an attempt to reconcile, or as philosophers say, harmonize free will and divine omniscience. Compatibilists argue that God may know your choice, but you yourself are the one making that choice. His knowledge is not the cause of your action. Instead, it's more like a perfect mirror, reflecting your choice but in no way shaping it. This is a very subtle nuance, but it allows for the preservation of both ideas, an omniscient God and a morally responsible human being. Does that sound logical? Or is there still a catch? Let's complicate things a bit and try to look beyond our usual understanding. What if the problem lies in how we perceive time? As humans, we experience time as strictly linear. There's a past that has already happened and is immutable. There's a present where we make choices, and there's a future that hasn't arrived yet and seems open to us. We progress along this timeline sequentially, second by second. But what if for God, time as we understand it simply doesn't exist? Imagine that for him, there are no distinct categories of was, is, and will be. He perceives the entire timeline not as a sequence of events, but as a single, unified whole. It's as if you're looking at a panorama from a very high mountain. You see the entire road from beginning to end, the place you started from, the turns you've already passed, and the stretches that still lie ahead. You perceive the entire journey all at once. This analogy helps us grasp that for God, perhaps everything is now. He doesn't predict your future like a fortune teller. He simply sees it as clearly as we perceive our past. He sees your decision to drink coffee in the morning, not because he compelled you to, but because in his eternal now, you have already made that choice. This isn't predestination as we understand it, but rather a perfect knowledge of a reality that already exists, yet for us remains unlived. This idea of a timeless God is one of the most popular and elegant attempts to resolve our paradox. It allows for both divine omniscience and our personal freedom. God knows but does not interfere. He sees the outcome but does not dictate the process. Your decision remains yours, yet for him, it is already an intrinsic part of the eternal picture. Quite a powerful argument, wouldn't you say? But there's another theory, even bolder and more intricate. It's called Molinism, named after the Spanish theologian Luis de Molina. According to this concept, God doesn't just know what you will do. His knowledge goes much deeper than that. He knows what you would do in every conceivable situation, under any combination of circumstances. This is referred to as God's middle knowledge. Imagine God as an incredibly powerful supercomputer. He has not only comprehended this reality we inhabit, but also all possible alternative universes. He knows the global ripple effects if you had chosen tea instead of coffee. He knows that if you had turned left instead of right, you would have encountered entirely different people, and your life would have unfolded along a completely different path. Molinism posits that God, with this boundless middle knowledge of every possible choice by every being, simply selected from an infinite array of universes the one that best aligned with his divine plan. Yet within this chosen universe, our actions remain truly free. God knows how we will act, but this knowledge is predicated on our inherent free will. It's like an incredibly intricate strategic game with an astonishing number of branching paths and potential outcomes. God knows all possible permutations of events, knows which path you would choose at every decision point, and ultimately orchestrates the game toward the most optimal outcome. Yet your journey still hinges on your decisions at every crossroads. This is an incredibly nuanced and profound concept, attempting to reconcile God's omniscient control and comprehensive knowledge with our genuine free will. It grants each of us immense potential for autonomous decision-making, while simultaneously allowing divine providence to steer the overarching narrative. Now let's turn our attention to the scientific perspective on free will. Philosophy and theology offer their own views, but what does modern physics tell us about it? Certain physicists, particularly when discussing quantum uncertainty, propose that at its most fundamental level, the future is not predetermined at all. The world of subatomic particles is, by its very nature, unpredictable. For example, we can't precisely predict the exact moment a particular atom will decay, or precisely where an electron will be moments later. Its state is described solely by probabilities. If an element of true randomness, a genuine uncertainty, exists even at the level of the universe's tiniest building blocks, how then can we speak of the complete predetermination of our complex human actions? After all, we ourselves are composed of these very particles. Certainly, bridging the gap between quantum mechanics and human consciousness is a significant conceptual leap. Nevertheless, this idea adds considerable weight to the arguments of free will proponents. If the world isn't a completely deterministic mechanism, where every event is unambiguously predetermined by its predecessor, then a very real, physical space opens up for our free will and our choices. This fundamentally challenges the very notion of a preordained and immutable future, instead proposing a world where the future is, to a certain degree, open and actively being shaped in the present moment. But let's step away from the intricacies of physics for a moment and delve into something perhaps more relatable. Psychology. Why is the belief in free will so incredibly crucial for us as humans? Here's the simple truth. It forms the very foundation upon which our entire system of morality, ethics, and, most importantly, accountability is built. Consider this. If we truly lack genuine choice, if every action we take is simply predetermined, how can we possibly judge someone for what they do? How can we praise them for their virtues or punish them for their crimes? If they had no other option, then in essence, their responsibility is negated. Concepts like good and evil, merit and blame, justice and injustice, they all lose their meaning if we are merely puppets, either of some unknown overarching force or an unbreakable chain of cause and effect. Our very self-awareness, our sense of dignity, our understanding of ourselves as individuals capable of making decisions and influencing the world, all of it is built upon this profound sense of free choice. We need to believe that our efforts truly matter, that our decisions actively shape our path. This is precisely why most people, at a very deep and intuitive level, resist the notion of absolute predetermination. Our fundamental sense of self simply won't allow us to accept that we are mere programmed automatons. We perceive ourselves as the architects of our own lives, embracing all their triumphs and tribulations. This very sense of agency and freedom is absolutely crucial for our psychological well-being and a fulfilling existence. This isn't just a philosophical debate, it's a fundamental question of who we are. What if the very question we're asking is fundamentally flawed? Could it be that we're attempting to impose our limited human logic, our purely terrestrial understanding of cause and effect, on something that exists far beyond our comprehension? We operate within the confines of three-dimensional space and linear time, always looking for straightforward connections, cause A directly leading to effect B. But divine omniscience, if it truly exists, may operate on a fundamentally different plane, guided by principles utterly inaccessible to us. It's akin to trying to explain Einstein's theory of relativity to an ant that perceives the world solely in 2 dimensions. It simply cannot comprehend space-time curvature because its brain isn't equipped to process such complex notions. Philosophers and theologians have grappled with this question for centuries, each side presenting powerful, meticulously reasoned arguments. There is no simple yes or no answer that can satisfy all parties and definitively resolve this paradox. Perhaps the truth isn't found in a direct contradiction between these two concepts, but in their harmonious, though currently invisible to us, coexistence. What if divine knowledge and human free will actually operate on entirely separate, non-overlapping planes of reality? They might be like 2 sides of the same coin, impossible to perceive simultaneously, yet both absolutely necessary for the coin's existence. This perspective allows for a myriad of interpretations and frees us from a rigid binary choice, opening the door to a deeper, though perhaps less certain understanding of the world. Ultimately, after all these reflections, we are left with a set of beautiful, yet ultimately inconclusive metaphors. We've conceptualized life as a movie that's already played out. We've imagined God as an observer from a mountaintop, taking in the entire panorama at once, or as a supercomputer, calculating every possible outcome in the game called life. Each of these metaphors, in its own way, offers a fresh and unique perspective on the problem. They stretch the boundaries of our perception, allowing us, if only for a fleeting moment, to grasp something truly unfathomable. Yet, none of them has provided that definitive, undeniable answer that would completely resolve all our questions. We still sense an unresolved paradox lurking beneath the surface, constantly challenging our minds to their fullest extent. This very tension is what makes the subject so endlessly captivating and timeless. Perhaps the true essence of this philosophical journey lies not in finding definitive answers, but in the search itself. This relentless drive to comprehend what lies beyond our ordinary grasp. We're not merely seeking answers, we are in fact exploring the very frontiers of our own understanding. And here's where we approach what might be the most profound, and arguably the most critical, shift in our thinking. What if free will and divine omniscience aren't adversaries, aren't mutually exclusive concepts, but rather two absolutely indispensable sides of the same coin? Let that idea truly sink in. The most potent argument, one that can entirely reshape your understanding of this dilemma, is the crucial distinction between knowing and causing. They are not one and the same thing. Let's use our time traveller metaphor to illustrate this difference. Imagine you are a brilliant scientist. You've invented a time machine and decided to travel back to 79 AD to witness firsthand the eruption of Vesuvius and the destruction of Pompeii. You observe this monumental and tragic event unfold. You know with undeniable certainty that Pompeii is doomed, that lava and ash will engulf the city, and thousands will perish. Your knowledge is absolute and infallible. But did your knowledge cause this eruption? Did you, merely by observing it, force the volcano to awaken? Of course not. You were simply an observer, privy to information about the future, from the perspective of Pompeii's inhabitants, which for you was already historical fact. You had no influence on the course of events whatsoever. You merely knew the outcome. You were not the cause. Similarly, if we extend this analogy to God and imagine him existing outside our linear time, the entire picture becomes much clearer. God doesn't predict the future like a fortune teller, merely making educated guesses. He's not a prophet who sees potential outcomes. He simply perceives the entire timeline all at once, as effortlessly and naturally as we recall a day that's already passed. He perceives your choice to drink coffee or tea in the morning, not because he forced you to, not because he manipulated your desire or planted that thought in your mind. Rather, it's because, in his eternal now, you have already freely made that choice. Your action is truly free. You are the sole agent of your own choice, and his knowledge isn't an active intervention. Rather, it's a passive, yet perfect observation. It doesn't cause your action. It simply registers it as an already accomplished fact within his all-encompassing perspective. This completely reframes the situation, doesn't it? It reveals that the paradox of free will and divine omniscience only exists from our limited, time-bound human perspective. We're attempting to cram infinite knowledge into our finite frameworks, but from the vantage point of eternity, for God, there simply is no contradiction. Your freedom, your genuine choice, creates reality, and God simply knows this reality. He perceives it in all its fullness and diversity, without any need to predetermine or control it. This allows us to preserve both God's omnipotence and omniscience, alongside our authentic, profound freedom. This truly is a game changer. And this brings us to the most mind-bending twist. What if free will and divine omniscience aren't adversaries, but two sides of the same coin? Think about it. The most powerful argument, one that completely reframes the issue, lies in the distinction between knowing and causing. Let's use the analogy of a time traveller. Imagine you invent a time machine and journey back to witness the eruption of Vesuvius. You know Pompeii will be destroyed. Your knowledge is absolute, but did your knowledge cause the eruption? No. You're simply an observer with access to information unavailable to the people of Pompeii. Similarly, if we envision God existing outside our linear timeline, he doesn't predict the future. He sees it, just as we see the past. He sees your choice to have coffee in the morning, not because he forced you to do it, but because in his eternal now, you have already made that choice. Your action is free, and his knowledge is passive. This is a complete game changer. It turns out the paradox only exists from our time-bound perspective. From the vantage point of eternity, there is no contradiction. Your freedom creates reality, and God simply knows that reality in its entirety. So what conclusion can we draw? The problem of free will and omniscience isn't so much a puzzle with a single correct answer, but rather a mirror reflecting our perceptions of time, choice, and responsibility. Perhaps there is no definitive answer, and the very act of seeking it is the most valuable experience. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If it sparked your curiosity or made you think, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new philosophical discussions. Now for the main question for you, how do you resolve this paradox? Do you believe in predestination, absolute free will, or that the truth lies somewhere in the middle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read them.